for the last generation,
I'm
maybe you have a choice.
MakeTheMoreChoice.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations
and I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barbers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Cleveland. Good morning, John Stanberry and Franklin Yancey.
Good morning.
Hey, Steve.
Good morning, Daniel Brantley, our engineer. All right. Good morning. I just feel like saying good morning this morning.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to another edition of Backfire. Hey, let's start out. We've got a local call on the phone from Polk County. I call them local in Polk County now since I spend a lot of time in Polk County. Mr. J.T. Lemons, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, J.T.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
All right, now can you hear me?
Yeah, better.
All right, J.T. Lemons is the owner of Ocoee Outdoors in Polk County, and this week they had Senator Bob Corker up there to talk about TVA, and the headlines were in the banner, TVA gets it. Tell us about your meeting with Bob Corker up in Polk County, J.T.
Well, it was a good meeting. We had a good turnout. The Polk County Chamber of Commerce sponsored it at the Ocoee River Barn, and there were 50 or 60 people there, I would estimate. A lot of local officials and just interested local people. Some folks from Cleveland, Bradley County, from Melissa Woody from the Chamber of Commerce was there, and some people from Cleveland State. But the meeting went real well. Senator Corker's aware of the situation and pretty up to date on the issue and the details of the issue. So he realizes the TVA's what they proposed, well, their last proposal to us was $1 million a year. So over a 35-year period, that would be $35 million. But that doesn't even include the escalators that they intend to add to the charge. So who knows what that would be. The contract we're currently under, which runs out at the end of 2018, we paid $6.5 million for the 35-year contract. So it's gone from $6.5 million to over $35 million. So it's over a 300% increase, and the senator talked about that and how that's not reasonable, and TVA should be a little more reasonable with this. And so we're hopeful that with his encouragement and some other officials, Lamar Alexander and Chuck Fleischman, some of our local officials, I hope they'll have some influence over TVA to get them to come down a little more reasonable price.
I'm reading here in the banner, they said TVA is requesting $1.8 million per year. So anyway, basically, TVA was about to put everybody out of business up there, were they not?
Well, yeah, if we had to increase the price, with what they're proposing now, the price increase per person would be around $7.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty hefty price increase. And, we compete for the entertainment dollar with a lot of other entertainment options. And so every time you add a little more to the price, it's going to cost you with, you're going to lose some customers. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
Well, JT, did they try to justify this with their cost or their energy production loss, or is this just they want a chunk of the profit?
Well, one thing you got to remember is TVA is the only utility in America that can charge for downstream recreation. Every other utility has to go through the FERC relicensing, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission relicensing, and as part of that relicensing process, they have to agree to release water free of charge for downstream recreation. Well, TVA, being a quasi-governmental agency, is not subject to the FERC relicensing process. So they can charge for downstream recreation, which is, in my opinion, ridiculous.
Well, let's just go ahead and say it like it is. They've got so much debt from retirees and everything else in their pension funds being part of the and unionized, they're trying to come up with other ways to raise other money besides taxing us. Am I right or wrong? Any opinions?
Steve, I'm having a hard time hearing you. It's
Okay.
real fuzzy.
Well, I was hoping Franklin would say something.
Well,
He almost did.
first of all, I'm very supportive of the rafters' position in it. It is a unique circumstance. There's a dual mandate for anything that goes through these types of state and national parks to promote education and power in those circumstances, and that's where the collision is. I think the future of Polk County in particular, and to a limited extent Bradley County, is tied to the development of those natural resources from a tourism standpoint, though. And so I come down on the side of that for the long-term benefit of the community. It does generate power. It does help us all out, and I appreciate that. But, you know, they get to generate power 8 months out of the year, roughly unfettered. So it's a 4-month hiatus in that, and I think in the long run it produces more economic benefit for the area, probably even for the state, to have that as a tourist draw. And if those rafting organizations were to go under, it would be detrimental for the area.
Wouldn't be detrimental, it'd be devastating.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a difference in detrimental and devastating, frankly.
Well, it would be devastating to Polk County. Would it be
Yes, it would.
devastating? We're talking about
And to
the
all the
region
people
as a
that
whole.
live there.
We're talking about the region as a whole. And John, again, there we go early. Arguing with yourself
Wait a minute,
again.
before y'all get...
I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, but,
Hey, JT.
but here's the if you boil this down, the essence is, once again, a big oppressive government entity is crushing the private individual.
Well, it hasn't crushed it yet.
They're trying damned hard.
Yeah. JT, how long have you been in business up there? Can you hear me?
I think he's gone.
JT, are you there? All right, we've lost him.
The rafting groups have been in business since roughly 1979, 78, 79.
JT, there's some good stories. I wish we could have kept him on the air about him trying to borrow some money from some of the banks around town when he was starting the rafting business up there.
Trying to explain it.
Trying to explain what it was.
Sure.
He said he finally went into a banker's office. He'd been to every banker in town. He finally went into one that had a picture of a rafting trip he had been on. And he said he knew he was at the right bank then.
You know, the history is really interesting. The rafting business started when the flume line up there went into disrepair and power production stopped.
Yeah.
And that's when people discovered the potential of the river from a tourism and from a rafting standpoint. And at least as I understand it, TVA always had the goal of reestablishing that power production up there. And so there was a collision. This is not the first time we've had this debate and discussion. It's happened a couple of times before.
You're right, but keep in mind, this is the same TVA that built a dam up north of us, apparently just to further some real estate developers. The dam itself only produces enough energy to power the lights on the dam. So they don't have a lot of leeway here to make the claims that they're making. And on top of that, Franklin, JT educated me. I wasn't aware that they don't have to go through the same process that every other energy company in America does. Do you think that's fair? Why would a government entity, and we get into this with Congress. Congress passes overtime laws. They pass all kinds of employment laws that they then exempt themselves from. That's not right.
Well, what I know is that this process has gone on a couple of times before, and they've managed to find accommodations that worked out for everybody.
But the problem
There's
is,
no reason to think that won't happen again.
right, but you know what, Franklin? I'm sure plenty of Tories made that argument before the revolution that we could find accommodations with the king. But we decided that we didn't think we had to accommodate the king.
The scary part about John is he actually thinks there is a revolution coming.
There will be a revolution coming if the government keeps on the way they're going. What JT's talking about, Franklin, is a government entity crushing them.
All right, John.
That's what they're talking about.
This is really not that complicated ultimately. You either believe TVA should be utilizing the river for power, or you don't.
Here's what I
No,
believe.
no,
wait a
no,
minute.
no, you don't get it
No,
both
I
ways.
do get to, Franklin.
No, you don't.
I want them to follow the same rules that they force
Answer
private
the
energy
question.
companies
That's
to follow.
what he's talking about. We're not talking about building a new power plant
Well,
here.
the private companies can't
Answer
charge.
the question.
The
Do
private-
you think they should do it or not?
I think they should follow the rules everyone else follows.
Do you think TVA should be using the Ocoee River for power production? No,
Franklin, y'all do that
You
all the
do
time.
or
You set
not?
up straw arguments. My
No,
point
This is what you do.
Franklin,
you get lost in
if-
the weeds
No, there's
without
no
looking
weeds
at
here.
the ultimate
There's
answer.
no weeds here,
Yes,
Franklin.
there are.
Other companies have to provide the recreational use for free. Why should TVA be any different? That settles your question. If they had to abide by the same rules that every other energy company in America does, that would settle the very question you asked me.
Well, they have
So
a
I
dual
answered you.
mandate from Congress. Don't
Well,
they?
that's the problem.
Don't they?
They've been given special rules to
That's
play
right.
by, which is what oppressive governments do.
They would argue that the rules they've been given made it harder for them.
Fine,
to
then
do
get
that.
out from under the cover of the government. Buy yourself
By
off.
all means,
buy,
raise your
buy
power rates
themselves
some more.
back. Buy themselves back from the government.
I believe I need to invite JT to come on
I
live
think that'd be
some morning.
wonderful, and he and I would probably find substantial agreement. But I could probably get him to answer the question.
remember-
At least
I
that John
remember-
avoids.
I
No,
re-
you didn't.
Yes,
I remember.
You totally ducked it.
All right, let me.
I didn't duck it at
Yes,
all,
you
Franklin.
did. Do you
My
think
answer
TVA should
solved
be-
your question.
Do you think they should be generating power off the Ocoee, or do you think the recreational interests ought to have unfettered use of it? Make up your mind.
No, Franklin, that's not the question. The question is, should they have to follow the rules every other power? Guess what? Other power companies, non-government ones, generate power off the river and supply the recreational water. I say they shouldn't be any different. And that answers your question.
The big difference is the lake up there was created by TVA, and most of those private power plants never did that.
Well, how long are we going to pay for that, Franklin? 100 years,
I don't
500
know.
years,
Is there a
1,000
big-
years?
Is there a big uproar
And by
over
the way,
they manage the
well,
lake?
I don't know. Drive up to the one I'm talking about up above us here at Knoxville, and you'll see some farmer's beautiful silo out in the middle of the flooded lake where they condemned his land and took his family farm. He probably sees the lake a little differently than you do.
Maybe sometime in the next 3 or 4 months, John will actually answer the question I posed to him.
Well, he did answer it.
I did.
think.
I'm sorry that you can't understand
Anyway,
a
but let me say,
complicated
I
answer.
remember back when the flume line was closed down and the rafting started. Then, when the flume line was finished, there was a problem with the rafting continuing, and there
Yeah.
was a threat that it was going to
That's
close
right.
down then.
That's right.
And that's when there was a negotiation done to the rafters had to pay a certain amount
A fee.
Right.
Mhm.
The
And-
rafters had to pay a certain fee because TVA altered the flow of the river, which originally would have allowed the rafting without the flume line in
Right.
place.
Right.
So TVA set the conflict up to begin with.
Okay, well, the flume line had existed for
The river
For
had
decades
existed
and
since
decades and
time
decades.
memoriam.
I feel like
again.
Once
I feel-
again, Franklin's answer is government is more important than God's creation.
I just don't stick my head up my rear end and act like it doesn't matter.
Look, Franklin, it's an oppressive government agency.
No. When this started, there was a substantial debate over whether or not we needed the power and whether it had helped us hold down our power rates. That applies to everybody, not just the rafters. Now, I personally think TVA needs to favor the rafting because I think that's a better deal for our community in the long run, personally.
Well,
But that doesn't change the fact that that is power generation going on there, and you can either have it or not have
Franklin,
it.
is
but
there
sitting here
power generation-
whining about it is just
Is
stupid.
there power generation going on other rivers not controlled by TVA?
I suppose there
Is
are
there
some.
recreation on those rivers?
You don't have whitewater rafting
Is
like
there
that.
recreation on the rivers?
There probably is in some cases,
So
John.
private companies are able to figure out a way to generate power
No,
and
no,
not disrupt other
you-
private companies.
You can't
the government,
have the
on the
flume
other
line
hand, shuts
and have
down
the water go
rivers.
through the river.
Well,
You can't do it both
Let
ways.
me ask you a question, Franklin. Out in California, your same crazy liberals are killing the most productive agricultural area in the country because they want to divert river water into the fields to water them. So
What are
your
you
people
talking
are
about?
against diverting water to help the farmers, but you're for diverting water for a government
I
entity,
don't know how to
TVA.
tell you this, John, but they already divert substantial amounts.
They
of
have
water to the
stopped
fields.
diverting it out in California and almost killed the most productive agricultural area in the country. So government in other words, under your thought process,
No, John, it's not
government's
my
always
thought
right.
process.
Government's
No,
always
you don't
right.
listen. Here's your problem. You never listen.
I listen all the
No,
time.
you're not. You're the one who is ignoring the question. Do you want them to generate the power through
I've
the
answered
flume
you
line
multiple
or the
times.
not?
I've
Just
answered
answer it,
you.
yes or no?
Yeah, I do, Franklin.
Okay.
But they don't have to do that and
Finally.
shut the rafting
It only
off.
took me asking the
Franklin, no,
question
stop. Are
19
they doing
times.
it right now? Are
What?
they doing it under the current scenario?
Yes.
Then why do they need $35 million more dollars
Who
from
said
an
they
industry?
did? Did I
They
say that?
did. The
Did I
government
say
did.
that?
TVA did.
Is that going to be the
Then
final
they're
outcome?
wrong. Well, I don't know, Franklin.
You don't either, do
The
you?
rafters are up against a federal bureaucracy. It is almost an impossible David versus Goliath fight. And
Well,
my
let me-
point
well,
to
let me
you
ask
is
you- let me ask
you
you,
keep
John.
empowering
Let me ask
more
you,
and more
John.
bigger government.
Let me ask you, John, are those magical Republican representatives you've got over there, the United States senators and congressmen, are they going up there battling the big evil TVA for the rafters?
They're trying to help
Are
the
they
rafters.
doing that or
They're
not?
trying to.
Who was in office when that happened? Was Lamar Alexander involved in
No,
that?
actually, if you want to talk about it, FDR's the one that flooded
no,
all the
no,
land.
no. When this happened in the
FDR's
80s,
the one that
John,
set
who
this
was
up.
it? Was
All
Lamar
right,
Alexander involved?
okay. Now listen, Old Town Cleveland. This sounds like we're talking about a history event this morning. Y'all are yelling and screaming at each other.
Well,
We started
John, could use
talking
some
about
history.
rafting.
You could use history. The river was there first.
Of course it was, John.
Well, the government screwed it
and
up.
so
as
was all
usual.
the flooding around here.
The
You want
government
that back?
screwed it
You
up.
want that back?
It would have taken care of itself just like it had in other areas, Franklin.
All right. I've got one more piece of news from Polk County. What was it you were reading this morning about some guy running for politics up in Polk County?
There's a new billboard up in Polk County that says I don't want to misquote it. Oh yeah. That says "Make America White Again." RickTylerForCongress.com, and then it goes on and has a website for him, which we listened to a moment ago, and he talks about the crisis that's about to happen in America because of the browning of America.
I think
From way
it's
our
a
forefathers intended
sad deal that this guy came out and started this. But anyway.
And he's apparently running as an independent against Lamar Alexander.
All right, U.S. District Judge rules against the American Atheist. That's our sheriff's deal. What's the opinion of that, Franklin?
There's a process. It went through the process, and they lost. End of story.
Now then, who's having to pay the court costs on this and
The
so forth?
taxpayer. Well, I don't know. He could have
Well, you
he
don't-
could have ordered them to pay it. I don't know
Court
if he
costs aren't typically taxed in federal court anyway. It's not really an issue.
Well, who
It's
would-
not an
did.
issue.
But we have got attorney fees.
Yeah, who'd pay?
Well,
the
we had
attorney?
attorney's fees, yeah.
Who's we?
Hmm?
Who would be
The
we?
taxpayer.
The
Bradley
taxpayers,
County
of course.
taxpayer.
Okay, because it was the sheriff.
Well, I mean, you either defend it or you give in to it.
All right.
But now,
Well, I'm sorry. I'm reading the story now. That's not the end of the case.
Right.
This was just on a temporary injunction they read. So the final hearing is set for August. I do think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the hard-hitting editorial in the Cleveland Daily Banner yesterday, though.
I didn't get to read that.
It really
Tell us about it.
Well, the headline is, would President Clinton spill secrets of Area 51? I got to say, our local newspaper's on the cutting edge
Now,
of
tell me what
opinion.
Tell me what Area 51 is.
Well, that's the secret test base out in Nevada where a lot of people believe the UFOs were kept.
did you read this, Franklin?
Yeah.
And who are you criticizing about this editorial?
I'm just criticizing that's what the focus of our newspaper
Well, where
was.
did they get the idea to write the story?
The gentleman, some local author, is the one who authored it.
Yeah,
They
but-
didn't write it; they just ran it.
But do you know why?
No, why?
Because Democratic presidential frontrunner Hillary Clinton promised in a radio interview that if elected, she would release the government records area. So your candidate is the one that brought this trivial trash up. She's apparently trying to get the crazy UFO vote locked
You
down.
really aren't much for humor, are you, John?
Franklin, my point
Really?
is, yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree with this. Is absolutely ridiculous. It is a ridiculous waste of time, and your presidential candidate is the one that foisted that ridiculousness
you're
on the
just
country.
not much for humor, are you, John?
I just want to make sure full credit is given for who generated that.
Did you
humor.
hear the interview that you're talking about?
No, I don't.
Of course
generally
not.
Listen
You
to
don't
her.
generally listen. So.
All
I
right.
think we can all agree on.
The Orlando gunman said he was an Islamic soldier. The Department of Justice is going to scrub the Islam references from transcripts of Orlando's terrorist calls to police. Why would you scrub anything?
This is a really difficult and thorny issue. There's a real consideration that we don't want to give publicity that can be utilized by those groups on their websites and so forth. And so when they release that, they don't want them to be able to play them or utilize that transcript in their own recruitment tactics.
So
And that's the reason why. So she's told us what's in it, what those references are, but we don't want to help them use those for recruiting tools. That makes perfect sense to me.
Do you think they'll use the point that America's cutting those terms out?
No.
Did they do that with Dylan Ruth in the attack in South Carolina?
They?
Yeah. Did they?
Dylan Ruth wasn't in the Islamic.
No, no, Franklin. He was. They labeled him as a white terrorist group, white supremacist. So did they censor what he had said? No, they didn't. They put it out in full. By the way, Franklin, this little quote you might want to think about, and that's why, whenever possible, my administration will make all information available to the American people so that they can make informed judgments and hold us accountable. Whenever we cannot release certain information to the public for valid national security reasons, I will insist that there is oversight of my actions by Congress or by the courts.
Okay.
That's Obama's own words.
Okay.
Did he do that?
There's still
Did he do
there's
that?
still an
Did he do that?
There's still an
But he's already
investigation
redacted,
going
right?
on, John.
Well, which court?
It's only been a
which
week.
court and which Congress is oversight?
Well, right
now.
now, it's too early for that kind of oversight. It's only been a week and a half.
Well, Franklin, they released the transcript and changed Allah Akbar to praise God. Tell me why that was necessary.
Yeah.
Same reason.
What reason? Allah Akbar?
To try and prevent them from utilizing it in their
No, Franklin,
propaganda.
I'll tell you why. Because Christians say praise God. So when you change it to praise God, you take away the obvious distinction that this was an Islamist attack. And that's why this has all been scrubbed.
Whatever you say, John.
Well, Franklin, you can say whatever you want to say.
No,
That's
it's
it.
not. It borders on silly.
Do you think that
It's
the
juvenile.
9/11 attacks changed America for the better?
Changed America
Changed
for the better.
America, made America better.
No, I don't think it made America better, John.
Well,
I don't think the deaths of 3,000 people
You
could be
don't.
treated that way.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that because a 25-year-old Syrian immigrant has been placed on the Homeland Security Advisory Council subcommittee on countering violent extremism. She was put on there the same year she became an American citizen. And after becoming a citizen, she said, I will always be Syrian. I will always be from Syria. I will always be of Syria. And that's my homeland. She said, now this is a direct quote, celebrating the 2014 anniversary of 9/11. 9/11 changed the world for good, and there's no other way to say it. She also has defended, she said when she was defending an argument against John Kerry, who actually talked about taking the refugees, she said she would be covered in salty white tears all over my news feed. She said that we need to be not looking at Islamists. We need to be devoting more attention to anarchists, sovereign citizens, white supremacists, and others. She wants no terms like jihad, Sharia, or Ummah to be used so that they don't offend Muslims. That's the woman that your president placed on the committee to help decide how to protect us from the homeland. Someone who believes 9/11 changed America for the good. Now, explain that.
What's this woman's name, John?
Layla Alawa.
Layla Alawa.
She's one of 15 people who is tapped to serve on the newly formed subcommittee. Pamela Geller had tweeted that the Boston Marathon bombings were a jihad, and she tweeted back, "Go F yourself."
I'll have to look this up. I've never
This
heard
is
of
another
this.
good quote for you. She said, "The U.S. has never been a utopia unless you were a straight white male that owned land. Straight up, period. Go home, shut up." She also tweeted that only idiots believe that America is the best nation in the world. Less than 2 weeks after the Boston bombing, she said, "You can't say something intolerant and not expect consequences. Not on my watch." Now, that's someone that he thought was an appropriate member for the committee deciding how to properly protect America. Please defend that, Franklin.
Well, let me look up what you're talking about, John.
Okay.
I've heard 911 calls played live before back. Will they allow the 911 call that this guy made in Orlando
Not so far.
to be played?
You may have heard them, but you've rarely heard them a week and a half after a crime was committed. So let's just be honest.
Actually, I think we heard the ones, they didn't have any problem saying who the killer was in the shooting of the Planned Parenthood clinic, even though he was clearly crazy and has now been deemed crazy. But they immediately labeled him as a pro-life person. And by the way, has anybody asked the Democrats about the shooter down there, why he chose to be a Democrat? Why he chose to be a member of the Democratic Party? He's a Democrat, Franklin. On his feed, he
hadn't
talks
heard
about
that.
it. He's actually
I hadn't
Hillary.
heard that one, John.
He's a Hillary Clinton
Well,
supporter.
that's because all Democrats are radical Muslim
No,
extremists
but I'm
born in
telling you,
Kenya.
Franklin,
John.
my point is the NRA has been blamed for the shooting when they had nothing to do with it. Why hadn't anybody said, well, gosh, maybe the Democrats are to blame because he's a Democrat? By the way, Walt Disney, have you heard that one? Walt Disney informed law enforcement about him, how long? I think 3 or 4 weeks before. Now think about that. He and his wife visited Disney, what used to be the downtown Disney, and whatever he did, now tens of thousands of people visit downtown Disney a day. Whatever he did was bad enough that they took notice of it and notified the FBI about him casing Disney. So now you've got you've got a gun owner, a gun shop owner who refused to sell him items, notified the FBI. You've got Disney, notified the FBI, and nothing was done. Tell us how that ball got dropped, Franklin.
Hang on just a moment, John. I'm looking up the details of what you said here.
The problem is the Democrats are trying to change the gun laws again, and we've got enough gun laws in place. If we just go along with them, they'd probably work.
Well, actually, there were 4 gun laws put up, 2 by Republicans and 2 by Democrats. The Democrats blocked the Republican bills, and the Republicans blocked the Democrat bills. But there was a difference between those bills. The Democrat bills would have made anybody on any government list unable to buy a firearm.
Excuse
Period.
me, let me back up for just a moment real quickly.
Go ahead.
This is a frequent internet hoax myth that's gone around. Layla Alawa was not appointed to any committee by President Obama.
Who was she appointed
She
by?
wasn't appointed by anybody. She took part in a panel discussion.
Who put her on the panel?
He did not put her on the panel.
The department,
She
the
had no
secretary
She
did.
had no official role. She was not appointed by anybody.
Who are we talking about?
The one he just talked about a minute ago.
Hold on.
Her committee submitted a report to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, and he's submitted that report to Congress. She was part of the committee that made the recommendations to not use the word jihad, to not use the word
In fact,
Islamist.
that part is also not correct.
Okay.
What
Well-
what the report actually said was that we ought to use the English translations of those words so that the American people would know what the words
Of
actually
course,
mean.
that's the way they
Like
turn
God.
it, Franklin.
Is that where you change it to
praise
God?
instead of Allah Akbar? Because the public, when they hear Allah Akbar, they know what it is.
For example, it said use the term American Muslim rather than Muslim American.
It also said not to use the word jihad, Sharia, takfir, ummah when discussing
What's
terrorism.
the definition of takfir, John? Tell
Frankly,
me
I don't know.
Exactly, that was the point.
But you know what?
Use
I
a
will know.
translation of it.
I do know what the term jihad means.
Really?
I
What
do
does
know
it
what
mean?
Sharia. Jihad is the war against the infidel, Franklin.
What does it mean?
It means that you are always waging war against the infidel. That's what jihad means.
Not exactly, John.
Well,
All right, hold that thought, Franklin. You can bring it back. We've got to take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
Woo FM is your hometown oasis. WOOP LP Cleveland. Woo Violent. Radio 99.
Check into cash. The cash you need today is waiting for you at Check into Cash. It's your money, so come in and get it.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
The cash you need is right here, so stop worrying and stop in to Check into Cash today.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, government checks, payroll checks, and many more. And when you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off your next purchase. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail. So stop by one of our 11 locations or visit us online at usmoneyshops.com.
Buy yourself or a coin today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some restrictions may apply. See store for details.
After 135 years, Hardwick Clothes, America's oldest since 1880, has delivered on our commitment to produce the finest navy blazer in America. This limited edition blazer was announced as the style winner in Garden and Guns Made in the South Awards. Crafted in Cleveland, Tennessee, we use premium Italian wool from Vitale Barberis, custom Bimberg lining, and signature gold buttons. It's available through the finest men's stores or at hardwick.com.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Dr. Christopher Chase, with Associates in Plastic Surgery, now offers his patients the convenience of a Cleveland office at 2350 North Ocoee Street. Dr. Chase specializes for the ladies in breast augmentation, including lifts, reconstructions, and reductions, also tummy tucks or mommy makeovers, and facial rejuvenation, including facelifts, eyelids, brows, nose, and he also offers Botox procedures. Check out Dr. Christopher Chase. He is certified by the American Board of Surgery, the American Board of Plastic Surgery. He's a member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Check their website out at aprs.md. That's aprs.md. Call for your convenient appointment in Cleveland at 624-0021. 624-0021. 2350 North Ocoee. That's Dr. Christopher Chase.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
Train engineers put our heating and cooling products for almost every test imaginable. So while you're sending your kids to school, they're sending 10,000 volts through a compressor. Testing like this is the reason Train is so reliable, and why our engineers prefer their steaks. Well done.
Ready to indulge in Train comfort? Call a Train comfort specialist at Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. High-quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a train. Really hard.
Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center, or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Woo FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation.
For the administration.
She doesn't. She
has a company
She
that
participated in a
promotes-
panel discussion
that promotes trying to help Muslim women.
We're live again. All right, they've been arguing the whole break here about this, so let's get to the bottom of it. What's this deal about this woman? Who is she again?
She served on a panel discussion for the Department of Homeland Security that produced a report, and the explanation that Franklin's given is all this lawyerly explanation how they didn't actually say we want to avoid offending Muslims. What they said was we need to avoid using words like jihad and those kind of words to avoid offending fellow Americans. Now, the only fellow Americans who would be offended by the word jihad are Muslim Americans.
That's not what they said.
It is what they said.
No,
I'll read it
that's
back
not
to
what
you.
they said. What they said was that if you continue to use words like jihad and takfir and so these other Muslim terms, that nobody really knows what they mean. Translate them into English so people will understand exactly what you're talking about. That's what they said.
All right,
Number one.
so-
Number two, hold
so-
on.
so you're okay
hold
with
on,
holy
hold
war.
on, hold on.
Holy war. That'll
If
be
that's
okay
what
with
it
you?
translates to, sure I would
No,
be.
they won't be okay with holy war.
Number two, John said she'd been appointed by the president. Number two, that wasn't true.
She
Number
was
three,
allowed
number
to
three,
participate
number
by
three,
the president's
number three,
administration,
Number
folks.
three, she's not on the payroll in any
I never
way.
said she was on the payroll.
Number four, she said 9/11 changed the world for the good.
She did.
For good.
She tweeted
for
that.
good. She did do that. But her explanation for that was, I didn't mean it. It's a good thing. I mean, for good, forever. It changed the
and
world.
my comment back to Franklin about that was that if you trust that explanation, hire her to babysit your children. So anybody out there that thinks that's
John,
a reasonable
although John
explanation.
says I'm parsing words.
You are
the fact
parsing
is,
words.
95% of what he said proved to be false.
You're
and now he goes,
I
but if
didn't
people
hear
know
it,
that
Franklin.
5%.
I just heard you explain it, and I didn't hear anything that was false there.
You just
I'm not trying
explained
to
it
be
away.
one-sided.
Just like what's the definition of is under
No,
Bill
not
Clinton.
What the definition of is.
It is exactly that, Franklin. The point is she was allowed to participate
Oh my
by
God!
the Department of Homeland
in America,
Security.
we allowed somebody
Yes,
to
you're
talk.
right. We shouldn't have allowed her to participate. Anybody that doesn't have enough sense not to tweet 9/11 changed the world for good, anybody who tweeted that on any level is unacceptable, Franklin.
All right, let's change the subject here a minute. Boeing just signed a deal to sell Iran up to 100 aircraft worth $25 billion.
Yay, that's a great thing for the region, I'm sure,
Is that
isn't it,
good
Franklin?
is that good for America?
They're passenger airlines.
Oh,
Why
okay.
wouldn't that be good for
Well, I don't know.
America?
2 passenger airlines brought the World Trade Centers down.
Okay, John.
So, in other words, we'll just take the money and move on.
Any of
Is
those
that okay?
people come from Iran?
No,
No,
they didn't.
no, they didn't.
They came from Saudi Arabia, who's given $25 million to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, and who's propped up the Bush family for what?
They're not
Because
running.
you were real
Franklin.
happy about
They're
it,
not
yeah.
running for re-election.
My next question is...
I wish they were compared to your current candidate, but anyway.
Franklin, my next question, I think you'd probably be best qualified to answer. The shooter of this, the Orlando nightclub, wife is continuously under an investigation. They're saying, now I'm even hearing that he was talking to her on the cell phone while he was committing some of the crime.
I don't think that's they're investigating that, but I don't think that's the basis of the criminal investigation. They're really looking into whether she had knowledge in the hours or days beforehand that he was going to do this, in which case she would be subject
Well,
to
she
criminal
drove him.
prosecution.
She was with him at the Disney World.
John,
I'm just saying.
He asked me a question.
I know.
That's the
well,
answer.
Actually,
That's the focus of the
to
investigation.
go back to what you've hollered at me, I was agreeing with you.
Well, I want to say, how long does it take to figure out whether she was involved or not?
It does take some time to get access to text messages from the phone company. You got to get subpoenas for that. It takes several days to get those.
How long does it take to figure out that the wife of the Boston Marathon bomber, who was in a 800 square foot apartment while he built the bombs, should be liable? Because so far she hasn't been charged either by this administration.
I don't know the answer to that one, John.
Well, do you
but
think
I do
they've
know
had
the
enough
answer
time?
to this one. They're looking into that now, and they're actively looking.
Do you
into
think they've had enough time on the Boston
John,
bomber?
John,
Yes.
if that proves to be the case,
Well,
then
no,
yes,
that's
I
a
would
fact. She was in the apartment. It's an 800 square foot apartment, and he built the bombs in the apartment. Do you see any way she could have lived in an 800 square foot apartment and not known that he was building bombs?
I don't know the answer to that
And
question.
she has yet to be
But
charged.
I'm agreeing with you. If that is in fact the case, which I don't know, then I would agree with you.
Well, then why? All right, let's assume that that is the case.
If that's the case,
why
then
has
I
she
think
not
she
been
should be
charged
prosecuted.
yet? Why has she not?
John, I don't know the answer to the question yet because I don't know the facts.
Well, probably
I'm happy
because
to
it might
look
be-
into the facts
Well,
to
it
see if
might
that's
be
true or not.
offensive to Muslims. That's probably why she hadn't been charged. We wouldn't want to offend anybody.
Well, then why are we looking into this one then?
Well, we aren't really looking into it.
You don't know that.
We're redacting things so the public doesn't have a good idea of what actually transpired.
So let's get to the bottom line. You think that in every criminal investigation, the details of the investigation should be immediately released to the public?
I think
Is that what you think?
In a case,
It's
like
been
this,
a week and a half.
Franklin, in a case like this,
You gotta
where,
move quick.
where the guy's dead, we're not going to prosecute him. Where they say we're going to release the transcript. Now, look, Franklin, if they had come out, listen to me real close.
Hold on.
No.
Let's talk about what an investigation is.
no, let's
They
don't.
know
Let's
it-
don't
No, they
confuse
don't
the
know
issue.
on the front end if there's anybody else who helped him.
If you'll let me finish, I would have gone right where you're going. If they had come out and said, because of the ongoing investigation, we're not ready to release anything, I would have said, okay, that's fine. I understand that. But when you release it and you redact it and the only thing you take out has no value to the investigation, the people over in the other parts of the world that he's aligned with, ISIS, they've already tweeted all of this. They've already put all of it out, that why he did it. So why would our own government redact his own statements of why he did it? That's the problem. Once again, this is a problem they created for themselves.
It's the same reason why we shouldn't, if we talk about the Charleston shooting, we shouldn't put pictures of Dylan Roof up at
Well,
that.
how quickly did they post the comments that the guy at the Planned Parenthood clinic shooter said?
The comments?
Within hours. They said he made a reference to saving the baby body parts. And that was the only comment he made. But our own government came out and said it looked like he was aligned with the pro-life movement.
Franklin, let me say something, and I want to say this, and it's going to sound really critical, but I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to just be open-minded. But right now, the way investigation go under the President Obama, America can't believe anything that comes from an investigation, and there's no time urgency. I mean, this is a horrendous crime. You know what? It's all over the news every day.
Have we struck back at ISIS yet?
Why can't we find out if this lady has been involved?
Wait a minute. Time out.
I mean, it's a simple process.
No, it's not.
It is.
It's not simple. There's nothing simple about this. And let's keep something in mind here. All right? San Bernardino,
ISIS.
Chattanooga.
ISIS.
All homegrown.
All ISIS.
All
I
homegrown.
don't care where they came from. They're all ISIS.
It is important.
It's not important, Franklin. It's all motivated by ISIS and by jihad. You know, the word we're not supposed to use.
Yes, and you seem hell-bent on helping ISIS
Franklin,
recruit
they're
Americans.
Blowing up your opinion.
They're
That's
killing
your
us
opinion.
daily.
That is one side's
Golly.
opinion. It's not America's opinion.
Oh, I
It's
don't know
not
if that's true or
Americans'
not.
opinion.
I don't know if that's true. What do you mean now?
All Americans don't agree with that philosophy.
Well,
I think we ought to call it what it is.
Okay.
Do you think we ought to call it what it is?
Absolutely.
Fine.
Daniel, do you think we ought to call it what it is?
Fine.
All right.
Fine.
We can't seem to call anything what it is under this president.
Fine.
The Fort Hood shooting, Franklin, is labeled workplace violence. He yelled Allah Akbar. He had given his allegiance to ISIS. He had been reported by multiple other soldiers. He shot people while he praised Allah, and it's still labeled workplace violence. Now explain that one.
Now, to answer your question a moment ago, Steve.
Okay.
What have we done to ISIS? Well, they've lost 50% of their territory in the
you
last
might
12
talk
months.
to the CIA director and all the generals.
No, that's not what he said, John, and you're going to mischaracterize
I'm not.
again.
I'm going to tell you that he said, yes, they've lost some ground in those countries.
Half
but
of the
their
ground.
ability to strike us across the ocean has actually grown. Has grown.
Because territory doesn't require that.
Well, frankly, let me just.
First of all, let's
All
be
right, but
clear.
no, wait a minute.
Wait, you're not getting a free
No,
pass.
let me give you a little bit of a taste
You say strike us across the ocean. They didn't send somebody here to strike us. They recruited somebody already here to do it.
That's even worse.
That's called a sleeper cell. That's called a sleeper cell.
We're not doing
It's
anything.
called a
to
sleeper
stop
cell.
that. What are we doing to stop that?
Well,
his father is an open supporter of the Taliban.
Where
Why
does
was
he
he
live?
here in the first place?
Where does he live?
Why did he get in the country to begin with, Franklin?
Where does his father live?
Franklin,
Where
right
does
now
he
he's back and
live?
forth. 2 months ago, he was in Washington testifying before Congress.
A man who went to the same mosque reported him to the FBI in 2014.
Yes.
Well, why have we dropped the ball over and over and over again?
What did you think they should have done?
Well, one, I probably would have rounded him up, put him in jail.
For
and
what
maybe,
charge?
Franklin, here's
No. You act like, you come in here and make this big deal about the Constitution all the time.
You mean the Constitution
and
that
then
this
I'm
president...
Then I'm asking you
All right,
what it is you would have them do.
Let me answer you. First off, that's the crux of the problem. He has made this into a law enforcement issue.
If
when
it's an American
when it's
citizen,
a law
it
enforcement,
is a
well,
law
it
enforcement
wasn't when
issue.
he bombed that U.S. citizen with a drone strike, was it?
If
He
he's
didn't have
over
any
in a
problem
different
doing that.
country fighting
He
against
didn't have
US
any
forces,
problem doing
it's
that.
a different issue.
He certainly didn't have any trouble in targeting conservative groups through the IRS.
I think we ought to just not call it what it is and take away Americans' guns. And that way...
I don't want to take away Americans' guns.
Okay.
I'd like them to have a little common sense about their guns, but that's apparently beyond the pale, too.
Well, actually, Franklin, let me ask you about that, because the bills that got voted down,
Mm-hmm.
the two Democratic bills, the first one would have stopped anybody on any of the government watch list from buying a gun. That Republicans voted that down, okay?
Oh, and don't forget, though, that it had a process for you to go to court. Yes, it did.
No, stop for a second. I'll explain it to you. You might want to pay a little more
They're
attention.
different ones,
No,
John.
the Republican bill had that. The Democrat bill didn't. The
No,
Republican
John,
bill...
didn't. No.
Senator John Cornyn has had a bill for a long time. It denied people who are on the terror watch list, not all the watch list. It gave a 3-day delay, and it allowed prosecutors to make a case to a judge that that person was actually a threat. Roughly 40% of the people on the watch list have no known ties to terrorist groups. The Democrats voted the Cornyn bill down.
The difference that we're talking about here is that John's bill, the one he's talking about, gave the government 72 hours to go to court and prove that they had probable cause that this person's a terrorist. The other bill gave them a longer period of time and required the individual to ask the court.
So in other words, the full force of the government, all of their resources, all of their lawyers,
Well, as
they don't have to prove anything.
As they pointed out, John.
They don't have to prove anything.
They pointed out, John, that if they had probable cause, they would already be charging them with a crime.
But Franklin, the point
The
here is
idea
due
to
process.
Stop them before they commit a crime.
Your Democrats have managed to push the ACLU and
what
the
I know,
NRA
John.
together.
Here's
the
what I know,
ACLU
John.
agrees with the NRA on
Here's
this,
what
Franklin.
I know, John. 85% of Americans supported that Democratic
because the
bill.
media has spun
and
this.
65%
and you said,
65% of the NRA members supported the bill.
not when you explain what
Yes,
it
they
actually
did.
is, Franklin.
Yes, they did.
No, it's not.
Yes, they did.
By the way, Franklin, let me ask you a question.
Yes, they did.
Do you support banning the box bills that the Democrats have pushed?
Banning the box.
That's
Well,
where you're
I
not
know what
allowed
it
to
is.
ask a question about whether you've had a criminal conviction or not for a job hire.
What I support
Are you against?
Let me answer
having
the
a
question, John.
You mean let you think of your lawyerly explanation?
I'm telling you what my belief is.
He's too blatant.
I think if someone has the question ought to be phrased differently on the thing. No, hold on.
Which is just what I was telling you about your surveys that you're putting up.
Here's the question. If you're telling me the answer is if people have completed their sentences, then I don't think it ought to be used against them.
You mean due process?
No.
If they've gone through due process.
No, not due process.
No, my point is completing their sentence means they had due process.
Here's what I
the
think.
system worked, and they've been cleared of their charges.
Not
is that
cleared of them.
Well, they've served their time.
Served their time.
All right. So, as a Democrat, you're against the having the box for criminals, but you're okay with denying someone a constitutional right with absolutely no due process, right? Absolutely no due process.
First of all, John, I didn't say anything about banning it.
You're banning them from being able to buy a gun simply because their name shows up on a list by the government.
Okay.
But you're not against denying them a job because they went through the court systems. So in other words, folks, if you've been a criminal, if you have an actual past history, he doesn't want that considered. But if you've never done anything other than erroneously get your name on a government list, he's okay with taking away your constitutional rights.
Yeah, well, I think there is a big difference between going in and buying a bunch of guns and trying to get a job. Yeah,
well, what if the guy that's trying to get a job was convicted of buying a bunch of guns and killing people? And by the way, it's the government that let thousands of guns go to criminals through the program down in Arizona.
Anyway, we'll move on because I don't think we're getting anywhere with that. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton going to pick Elizabeth Warren as her vice president.
I don't believe she will be picking Elizabeth Warren.
There's a reason you probably don't believe that.
I don't think she's going to add anything to the campaign from an electoral standpoint.
And she probably lose a lot of money from Wall Street because they don't want her on there either.
Maybe not. I don't know. I don't. Although, if you want me to shed tears for Wall Street, that's not going to happen. So.
All right. Donald
Hillary
Trump
sheds tears. Why didn't she release the transcripts of her speeches?
Yeah, that's another good question I had to talk about today. Why won't she release that? What I mean is that
why can't we read her speeches?
I'm sure the answer to that question is that she probably made some pro Wall Street comments on that.
Oh my gosh! Well, doesn't the public?
Well, the fact is she's always been a centrist Democrat.
Well,
on this,
then release the speech. Let the public see it.
There's only one wacky zealot in this election, and it ain't Hillary Clinton.
Well,
frankly, Hillary's just perfect, huh?
Then
I didn't say that.
See the speeches.
I didn't say. Well, okay, I will. I'm all for that, John.
Well, my problem, frankly, is
I'm for her releasing the transcript.
I agree, but my problem.
I'm also for Donald Trump releasing his tax returns to show how many years he paid no taxes.
Well, I'm for
then
that
see
too.
what you think.
Well, I'm for that too. Of course, I think taxes are way too high.
I wonder how many taxes Hillary's paid on that on her new latest venture that she's got billions of dollars in.
Billions?
Yes.
What?
What is that? I can't think what even you call it right now. Where her and her husband have hired their daughter to run around the country and run this billion-dollar business that foreign governments are donating money to.
They don't get paid.
It's a 501c3. They don't get paid.
The Clintons don't.
They get expenses out of it though, Franklin.
I'm sure his daughter's on the salary.
Yeah, about $600,000.
You don't think Bill gets any money?
That's hardly billions, isn't it?
Do you think Bill gets any money out of it?
No,
well,
I think he's getting his money
Chelsea
from giving
doesn't
speeches.
really need the money because her husband is a mortgage banker on Wall Street.
Okay.
Voting rights, North Carolina. What's going on there? Appeals court considers North Carolina controversial voting rules. And there was something about opponents object to the end of the same-day voter registration and a rollback of a week of early voting.
Well, because they want to make sure they can keep their role. And by the way, just
they want to make sure as many people can vote as
2
possible.
weeks. Yeah, but
and multiple Republican officials around the country
in
have
North Carolina,
that the whole point is to try to keep fewer people voting.
No, it's to try and keep illegal people from voting.
No, it's not, John.
Which
they've
would
said
be fewer.
They've said it in interviews.
Well, I tell you what, Franklin.
Just
according
admit it.
to you all, you'd set up a voting booth down on the border with Mexico.
John, just embrace the Republican
No,
Party.
Franklin,
Just
I
embrace
think you ought to to be a U.S. citizen
Embrace
to vote.
it. I
And
agree.
I think you ought to be a legal
I agree.
citizen to
I
vote.
agree, John.
Well, your people don't agree.
That certainly explains
Because,
why they're
frankly,
keeping old people
2
off.
weeks ago, I brought in a report where thousands of people on the North Carolina rolls were found to have also been on the rolls in Virginia and voted in both places. You know that thing called voter fraud that you say doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Thousands
We'll
voted.
see if that proves to be
Why,
true.
why should it be a big deal just to show ID to vote?
You got to show it to check a book out of the library.
I mean, really, why should it be a big idea for that?
You show the ID when you register to vote.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Now then, when you
Now,
go to
no,
vote,
no, no, hold on. No, hold on.
When you go to vote,
They
do you
have
show ID to show
because
that you're the one?
because they have too many restrictive things on what serves as an ID. And it excludes people who don't have those. I'm sorry, there are tons of people who don't have driver's licenses.
Franklin, the states that passed those laws all passed a law, like Tennessee did, that if you don't have a driver's license, if you don't want a driver's license, all you got to do is go to the Driver's License Bureau. They'll give you an official state ID.
Can I say something? If you want to vote, you need to be smart enough to have some kind of an ID to vote with.
When some elderly woman that's voted 20 elections in a row
Okay.
shows up and can't vote because she doesn't have a driver's license and she's never had one, there's something wrong with the
Yeah,
system.
but there's also something wrong when she died 19 years earlier.
And from another state.
But, of course, if you were buried by the Ford Funeral Home in Memphis, that's how they got their voter poll lists.
Frankly, now you've got to admit there has been a lot of voter fraud. So why shouldn't we have IDs?
There has not been a lot of voter fraud.
I think
There
has
is,
been.
Franklin.
No, there's not.
There is. In Minnesota, when Al Franken got elected, they found over 1,100 convicted felons had voted. His winning margin was slightly over 300. So 3 times his margin of victory were illegal, just the felon illegal votes. That's enough to change an election. Apparently, that doesn't bother you. By the way, just
What'll happen is we'll look into this and we'll discover that 90% of what John said about this is false.
are
That's
you
what'll happen.
denying the convicted felons in Minnesota?
I don't know that one, so I'll have to look into that one.
Well, as a parting, let me just leave y'all this. As we've talked about guns, we've talked about people sympathetic to terrorism who are participating in panel discussions
Who
with
won't
the Department,
call what it is what it
Department
is.
of Homeland Security. There are now more armed federal officers than U.S. Marines in America. Now let that sink in for a minute. The U.S. Marines are our main force for protecting us from the billions of people around the world who are not Americans. There are fewer of them than armed U.S. officers in the country to try to force U.S. citizens to obey the government.
That's pretty amazing.
By the way, the departments that have now been armed are the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Food and Drug Administration, Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Inspection Service, and most importantly, the IRS. The IRS has now spent $11 million on guns, ammunition, and military-style
Am I the only
equipment.
person who finds it somewhat ironic that the person in the room who thinks every citizen in America should have 4 guns on their person at all times is concerned about
No,
this?
the ironic thing here is that you don't understand what I'm even telling you. I think every citizen should have 4 guns because they are eventually going to have to protect themselves from an oppressive government, which has been the rule throughout history in every civilization. And it is exactly what the Founding Fathers wanted when they passed the Second Amendment. That's why they said things like, no free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. Thomas Jefferson.
No one can ever invade America because we are armed.
Well, that's what the Japanese said.
That's right.
They actually didn't invade America because they said there'd be a gun behind every blade of grass.
Yeah, those scary Canadians are coming down across the
All right,
border.
I'm going to make a
Syrians
Hickson
that we're letting in.
I'm
through
going to
the-
make a Hickson prediction here, and we got to go. All right? Hickson prediction. Donald Trump will start funding himself, and the American public will make horrendous donations to his campaign.
Horrendous.
Many, 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 many donations to help him win the presidency.
They better get started.
And he will kick Miss Hillary's rear end. Bye-bye now.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson,